right, hello and welcome everyone to our third exciting beta edition of the APAC Hybrid Cloud Kopi Hour. So again, I put the title up there because I'm not saying coffee. I got to tell you this. I'm saying kopi or kopi, traditional coffee beverage that you find in Singapore that we wanted to brand the show with. So this week we have kind of an exciting thing. I'm not joining you from Qatar, but I am joining you in my Belgian Red Devils football jersey. It's Devil time. I become the best fair weather fan for football this time of year and stay up all night and watch matches I barely understand. So I figured I'd do that. But in a more exciting way, we've got our regular contributors this week, and we have Dev Shanbag. Dev, why don't you go ahead and put the wrong thing up, but go ahead and introduce yourself. Say hello.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Kopi Hour. Glad to be here. Looking forward to what our friend Steve has to talk to about today. So, uh,
That's right. And so our other presenter is a regular on the Kopi Hour, and that's Steve Ellis. Steve, say
Hey,
hello.
thanks, August. I'm part of our APAC Office of Technology team, and we've recently spent quite a bit of time on the road talking about Red Hat technology and actually showing it in action at some of our customer events here across Asia. So, I was lucky enough to attend events in Jakarta and over in Australia, and some of my colleagues covered also our events in Mumbai, Tokyo, and we had a team in Korea running it, and we of course had an event in Singapore. So it's been a busy period, and it's been really nice to actually get out in front of customers and hear what they want to see from Red Hat, but actually be able to show our hybrid cloud technologies in action, and that's
That's
been
right.
like the really cool part about this.
And that's what's so cool is so Steve talking about the Red Hat Summit Connect events that we've done across the world. They're sort of a spin-off that came, I think, during COVID times of a way of bringing the excitement of Red Hat Summit to each region. I think there's been different versions in APAC. What did we have before that you guys did?
We used to run a Red Hat Forum event,
Forum.
similar model, but now they've like shifted the branding to kind of piggyback off our global Red Hat Summit event. And it really is, I think, Connect's a great term for this because it really is an opportunity to connect with our customers and partners and allow them to connect with each other. So a big focus of it is our customer stories. And we use it as a way to recognize customers who've done really exciting things.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
really
really,
true.
yeah, really loved attending the one in Jakarta because um, we hear we heard similar themes to what I'm hearing, say, in the ANZ region. It was really impressive to see how they used a chunk of our technologies to build the platform to track vaccinations and to track, COVID infections and to deal with an awful lot of those, healthcare impacts of the pandemic. And you imagine trying to do that at the scale of a country like Indonesia. It really was quite impressive.
Mm. Yeah, I
yeah,
was lucky enough actually to attend the ones in Sydney and Melbourne, and the partner side of it was also fascinating too because our partners are doing so much for us, and to actually get to connect with them directly, face to face. The partner event, the ecosystem event, was held just before the Connect event, so it really joined the two in a great way.
Yeah, that's-
Really nice. Dev, you were going to say.
I didn't get to go, but they were live as well online, so that was a good thing. Travels back, so that must be really exciting. We did a couple of customer engagements in Sydney and other places. I'm sure you guys must have enjoyed traveling and meeting with the customers, connecting with them.
Yeah, it's so much more real when you're able to have those conversations, standing in the hallway or to watch the session and then with all that energy after the applause to speak to the speakers and find out how it really went. And so I agree with you, Steve. Calling them connect, it just suits it perfectly,
mm,
especially in a post-pandemic world because we all got so disconnected, and it allowed us to really come back together and plug back in.
mm. And a big part of our conversation at the moment is this pitch we have about an open hybrid cloud and to actually show that in action. And I'm never a fan of canned demo. I want a live environment. And so to actually stand on stage and run OpenShift at scale and show workloads, how it impacts or changes the way an organization can perform and deliver to their customers, how their developers can be much more agile and flexible, and seeing the audience's reaction and be able to have those conversations afterwards was really amazing. It was really great to get out there.
Yeah, and Steve and I had been talking about the demo as he was putting it together, and weeks before we even had the Kopi Hour, and he's like, we could do this as a live stream. And I'm going, oh, can you? Can you? So I'm so excited because I got to go and watch Steve do it twice, along with all the other great presentations. And I'm sitting here thinking, we have to. This is going to be terrific. So we're literally going to get to see that today. We're going to see what was the official title? It's the Keynote Tech Demo.
Yeah.
Done live, but with a little bit of a behind the scenes, and folks like Dev, he's not had the chance to, he wasn't there to see it, so he's going to get to see it live, and we can hear a bit about the stories about how it went and what it was like at these venues and all that kind of stuff. So I just so glad to have this opportunity.
Yeah, and if you're on the stream, feel free to jump in and ask some questions.
Yeah,
and also realize that this is a real thing. It's a real demo that my peers here in the region now have access to. So if you want to actually see this in action, reach out to some of the Red Hat team, and they can actually come in and rerun this with you.
Yeah, I definitely encourage that as well. You've got folks here on this stream who are, in Sydney, Melbourne, New Zealand. Sorry, here in Auckland. But we've got people in Singapore and everything. We can do this demo for your customers, for yourself if you're a customer. We'd really like to share it, but it's really nice that it's kind of captured here. So that's exciting. All right. Well, as they always say, without further ado, shall I go ahead and share the screen? And
we'll
let you take it away.
So I'm just going to start with a quick photo. This is actually the venue in Jakarta, and this was an awesome venue. It was a really good event team. And the great thing about this environment was that we could go to a split screen. So we could have a combination of the technical demo and the slides up at the same time. It made for a very kind of engaging format. Now, it's actually a bit harder to do this on a web stream. So I'm just going to kind of alternate between a bit of slide content, which is about setting the context. But most of the time, I actually want to be inside the technology and showing it off. Yeah. So this was just to give you a little bit of a flavor of.
And I have to admit, when Steve does this demo, it's big, right? Like he's got multiple screens going, and so you're not just hit with slideware. He's back and forward. So we may not fully capture that here, but you'll see him live one day. It's amazing.
And this leads into our vision of the why we think open hybrid cloud's important. So I've just borrowed a slide from the opener just to kind of set some of the scene. Because when we talk about open hybrid cloud, we do truly mean hybrid. For us, our hybrid story is much more than a bunch of hyperscaler environments. It's everything from the public cloud through to your on-premise infrastructure, through to your edge devices, wherever you need to run your business. That's our view that a true hybrid cloud needs to be. And open, that's Red Hat's DNA. And we say here about being an open source leader. Our open hybrid cloud is fundamentally built on open source technology. And under the hood, one of the core components of that, of course, is Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And that brings us that security layer we kind of need, which again is very, very critical to this conversation. We hear about all of these, new security vulnerabilities. When you're built on a secure platform, you get a high degree of assurity. And we kind of live and breathe security here at Red Hat every day. And then on top of that, we acknowledge customers aren't just running in-house applications. They're running what's known as COTS, off the shelf, common off the shelf. They might be using things developed for them by custom partners, custom tech by partners. So our partner ecosystem is incredibly important. And we've literally got thousands, I think it's about 49,000 certified ISVs and global SIs delivering solutions today on Red Hat's platforms. As I mentioned, this being agnostic, that's a key component of our open hybrid cloud story. So we can run this where you want to run. And that means it's much easier to then reduce that cognitive load. You do things once and repeat them everywhere. And on top of this, your developer doesn't want to care about the infrastructure and where they're deploying code or optimizing it for Amazon versus Azure versus running on an on-premise hypervisor. They just want to deliver the code your organization needs. So these are some of the themes we dig into as we go through this story. And we're going to do it in the context or through the lens of a virtual customer and something we're all really familiar with. So our virtual kind of customer story here is about a web retailer, Cool Stuff Store Inc., who are like a North American web retailer. You know, we've all done far too much shopping in the last few years online because that kind of became the norm. And you think how those organizations had to adapt and change.
Yeah.
And then you think about the big shopping events. We're on top of a Black Friday type window now. If you're running a traditional kind of storefront, how do you scale that? How do you scale something that's a very old school, traditional storefront when you're dealing with a huge bump in customers, in a huge increase in load? And many organizations struggle at those windows, and many organizations struggled with, the increase in traffic during, the pandemic. So we're using that as our kind of context to set the story.
I really love that because it really gives that. I don't know. It's that kind of, especially with Black Friday just a week away and all the sales. I mean, I'm getting the emails already, but I love how you guys do that. You always have these very real world demos that can just let someone just get right inside it. It's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm getting similar things for like Singles Day, which was never a thing in New Zealand a few years ago. And we've done a lot of demos in the past. We've been across a range of industries. Ultimately, a large range of industries have some kind of storefront. Mm-hmm. If you're a bank, you have a customer-facing application. If you're in telecommunications, you have some kind of customer-facing platform. If you're a government department, you've usually got some customer-facing service. You have a web portal of some kind. You may not be shopping for product, you may be shopping for services. So as a scenario, it suits quite a broad range of our customer base. It's a common problem.
And geographically quite easy to identify with, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we're going to start the story where they're North American centric. They want to expand geographically. They can't do that because it's a big traditional monolithic application. So we're going to take you through their transformation story where their developer wants to cut code. Luckily, they're using some kind of source code management, but they're deploying on legacy infrastructure. And if they're lucky, most organizations that have been there before, operations kind of becomes a bottleneck. Now, as these customers transform, they need to start bringing in some kind of CI/CD. And, this could be using OpenShift's technologies. It could be some external solution integrated with OpenShift. It could be, many organizations are already going down a CI/CD journey. That's fairly critical because that gives you that consistency you need and means that the developers are just worried on cutting code. Then you need a consistent platform. And this is where we try to bring in OpenShift. OpenShift as a consistent platform means you have the same platform whether you're on-premises, legacy or bare metal infrastructure, or if you're running on the hyperscalers. And then operations is going through this change as well. We go on about DevOps, DevSecOps, but platform engineering is becoming quite an important term. And around that has to be changing the way we actually manage the environments. And we've pushed the management approach for a long time at Red Hat with our satellite technology for traditional Linux workloads. In the OpenShift ecosystem, this is really where advanced cluster management comes in. So that we now start to be able to offer a better pane of glass. Not a single pane of glass, but it's an overarching view, a way to manage our OpenShift environments at scale, multiple clusters, geographically dispersed. And as I said earlier, security can't be an afterthought. So our security product integrates into this whole journey, both from an operational infrastructure perspective and into the developers part of the journey. So this is where we kind of go when we went through this story. There was a lot of elements we wanted to include here, and we kind of just used the slides to give the audience like a keystone to know where we are in the journey as we go through it.
And that bit above the infrastructure, I just love it, right? We always talk about the OpenShift part being there, but I love that ACM, that you've got ACS in there. So these two, the security product, the management product. because it is that's the same. That can be normalized across all that infrastructure. It's just so
and
cool.
this is part of what we call OpenShift Platform Plus, and the plus really is kind of key here. There's some other parts in here that we don't really dig into because we're trying to deliver this in about 25 minutes on stage. So there's a lot of things I've got to go through fairly fast. And we're covering kind of three core pillars here. We're talking about the benefits of adopting a proper open hybrid cloud infrastructure, how that changes and can really accelerate application development as you start to look at cloud native development approaches. And then really, if you're going to do this, you need to bring in IT automation and management practices, because you've got to do this at scale without sacrificing stability and without sacrificing security. So that's kind of core to the steps we kind of go through. So the first pillar really is going back to where we begin. Like, where's the customer starting from? And this might be familiar to a bunch of you. It's very familiar to me because I lived inside customers doing this for many years. Developers would cook code, and if they were lucky, they could commit to dev. They could, build an application and push it onto some kind of dev environment other than their local workstation. Beyond that, everything was tended to be gatekeepered through operations, and often with some kind of change management process. You think about the impact on your time to value, how long it would actually take you to get that change out through your organization, which is why a lot of organizations were pushing out production changes weekly or monthly or even quarterly, because things might get as far as tests, be rolled back, new iterations each time. There's a lot of hand-holding involved. And even worse, all too often, in some cases, even the push to dev required operations. So developer would package something up, send it with some install notes, operations would install it. And that really does kind of impact your delivery times. And we go now about, time to value, and, developers are so important to organizations. How do we change this? And one way we can change this is through this hybrid cloud infrastructure adoption. You might think, well, how does that change things for the developers as well as operations? Well, in our story here, we say, well, let's leverage some of our existing infrastructure. We'll bring in our advanced cluster management for Kubernetes, and we'll run that on our hypervisor platform. We'll continue to leverage the value, the money we've spent on our bare metal infrastructure. And we know that our application needs a bit of grunt to run in production, so we'll run OpenShift on that at scale. But where do we run our developer workloads? How do we get developers agility? And scaling your developer footprint can be quite difficult, because all too often you've had one development environment that's shared across a range of development teams. Maybe you've got half a dozen environments shared across 30 development teams. Why not host your development environment on an OpenShift service? We have a cloud service called Azure Red Hat OpenShift that we jointly manage in conjunction with Microsoft. Because it's a managed service, you can elastically scale it as you need to meet the number of development workloads you have at any point in time. And OpenShift here is acting as the normalizer, so that all the environments are running the same Kubernetes platform. And if I just jump into our ACM console here, we can see our infrastructure. So I can see how many nodes, how many clusters I'm operating, how many pods are running. If I just want to look at this cluster, I can see its scale.
And
down
this
here,
is live, right? I mean, this is real.
live.
So Steve flips over from those slides into his running environment. So suddenly we're in live demo land.
And here I can see the workloads we've introspected. And like the kind of joke to the audience during the demo is, oh my God, my developers must be running Pac-Man in their downtime, because the Pac-Man application has been deployed. And this is quite a familiar little container app a lot of people use for demos. So it's quite a nice one to include. But if I kind of look through here, I've got normalized environment across my range of infrastructure. I can create new clusters. I have additional governance controls I can implement through this around how I want to approach, the way I'm securing the environment. Let me get rid of that. And so there's my operational dashboard across my range of clusters. So that's great. I've got that. But then, as a developer, I also now need to just cut code. I need to be hands-off in the rest of the experience. So this is where we start to bring in CI/CD. This is fairly critical. We need a consistent way to deploy, whether it's into dev or production, regardless of the environment. But we said earlier, we need more than just consistency. We need code quality and we need security. So for the story, we bring in advanced cluster security because that can actually be used as part of our pipeline. We can analyze our container images as they're being built, not just as they're being deployed. So we can actually prevent potential new security compromises early on in the development cycle. We shift the problem left. And then SonarQube is one of the many tools out there for doing things like code quality checks and unit testing. So that's the one we used as part of this. Argo CD is really well known in the industry, and that's actually part of OpenShift GitOps. So when you actually deploy OpenShift, you get OpenShift pipelines and GitOps and a bunch of other tools out of the box. So everything we're showing here isn't just about driving the experience. It all runs on OpenShift. We're hosting the tools we need on the environment that we're using for the demo.
That's quite good. And then so the demo is actually becoming an OpenShift tool, an OpenShift app. And it's just amazing.
And this is where we then move into the couple of the key developer-centric parts of this. You know, the inner loop is a concept where we have these two things, the inner loop and the outer loop. The inner loop's where the developer lives. The developer is king. The developer is driving those outcomes the organization needs, the new enhancements the business needs. And all they really want to do is cut code and make sure that gets built and deployed. And they may need to debug the code during that process, but most of their time should be focused on the code, not on where it lives or how it runs. The outer loop is where we want to make sure we have software supply chain security. We want to make sure we have consistency. We want to make sure we meet our compliance requirements. We want to do our automated tests. This is really, really crucial. So as a developer, what are the inner loop benefits? Because in the old days, everything was gated by operations. If I'm a developer today, what benefit do I get from OpenShift? Well, critically, OpenShift has a developer perspective. So I can immediately see how my application is behaving. I can see, based on the work, the project I'm associated with, I can see metadata that previously I'd have asked to ask for permission from operations to get access to. I can dig into things like the logs on the applications I'm running. I can look at my build pipelines, which is critical in the kind of the next part of our story. And I can look at our the topology of the application I've got deployed. So here we've now taken our legacy app and we actually have it deployed as microservices. We've got a catalog service, an inventory service. There's pricing service, and we actually have our web user interface. So if I just pull that up, let that load fresh. So now we have, so as a developer, I can get into there, and through this, I can go and look at other details, including the logs, and observe the environment and see how it's behaving without calling on ops, without having to raise a ticket. So I've got that immediate kind of feedback loop. So let's go and add something to my cart. I'm getting a little thirsty. Let's make sure it's in my shopping cart. There we go. I've got a tumbler so I can go and have a drink after.
It's a great part of the demo too, because you're able to now kind of turn and engage the audience, right? They're getting your message, but then suddenly it's like, yeah, you start going on about this tumbler and how they're in the cart. I know it's really nice.
Because the overall shopping experience, I mean, this is why this is quite a good, useful app to use. It isn't great. It doesn't have a good UI. It doesn't have good end user feedback. And so imagine as a business, you go, oh, we want an enhancement. We're not got good customer retention. How can we change this so that we can see our shopping cart? We get better feedback. I know, where I'm buying, other than I have $8.99 in the cart. I've got very little information. So what we've got is a developer view on this. Let's look at this inner loop, outer loop story. Let's write some code and then see what happens. So I'm going to jump in and change some code. Now, in this case, because we're just using like a normal kind of source code management system based on Git, I can just go and write code in pretty much any IDE I want. Now, we're using VS Code Web here because, again, I can host this on top of the OpenShift environment. But this could be your favorite IDE of choice on your developer's local desktop. So I'm just going to bring in a floating shopping panel change. And I'm also going to bring in second change, which is some unit tests, some additional unit tests. Because again, we're going about code quality. We want to make sure we've got solid tests. So let's commit that change. Cart. Yes. And we'll sync that. And at this point in the loop, I've done my bit. I may need to come back and debug it. But right now, the build's going to kick off. We're actually moving into that outer loop part of the construct. So let's take a look at what's really happening behind the scenes from the moment I kind of commit my code as the developer. I can go and have a look at our build pipeline. So because we've built these pipelines using OpenShift pipelines, the moment I committed that code, my pipeline run kicked in. So we're now performing the initial code quality checks and unit tests, and then we go through the rest of the pipeline. The great thing is I can jump in and immediately see the logs for everything that's happening, again, without requiring that interaction with operations. And our pipeline fails. So this is a good little bit of the story. We go, oh no, my release has failed because of a unit test issue. So we actually show we've caught a problem. And it requires a second code change. I actually need to go and remove this.
And I'll just interrupt. During the demo when Steve does this, he's so good at it, right? And I'm sitting there and he goes, oh, it's failed. And I spoke to people after it and they all believed you. They thought, oh, you had that moment of, oh no, live demo's gone wrong. And so it's creates such empathy both with the customers in the audience who have lived this in production environments and people who are interested in tech and demos who have lived that failure in reality. It's really good in bringing you back into it. It's wonderful.
And if this is in a real environment, the developer wouldn't be sitting here waiting for it to fail. You'd have this hooked into PagerDuty or Teams or Slack or Google Chat or whatever platform you're using for your developer conversation, and the development team would just be alerted. Oh, your build failed. Debugging that then, well, you could have the log data just pushed into the channel. They may not even need to come and check anything inside OpenShift, but if they want to, they don't need to ask permission. So I've made that change and I've got the pipelines kicked off again the moment I made that change. And we're now going through the rest of the pipeline. So we're now done the scans, the quality checks, we moved into the build. And what we're moving into here is the outer loop bit. This is where we're actually guaranteeing that we've got a secure software supply chain. And this looks a little bit like this. The developer cuts code and they're done. That's where they add value. That's what they do. They don't want to worry about, is it going to dev? Is it going to prod? Where is it being deployed? Is it on premises? I don't care. But that then triggers the OpenShift pipeline. And the first part is that initial code scan and unit test. And here we use SonarQube, which, again, in this case, is running on top of OpenShift. So I have a project inside SonarQube, which is performing those checks and analyses for me. And we can set things like a quality gate for this project that determines, has it met our code quality standards? Is it an appropriate release? And it will do some degrees of security checks as well. It also looks for potential bugs and issues. So we've got a couple of bugs highlighted, which are just common HTML formatting issues. The sort of thing that you just hand over to your web team and they go and push a quick change to go and tidy up your HTML tags and make sure things are compliant with modern HTML standards. But you can control how this is gated. So it's not bad enough to break the app. So we're going to let it through, but we really should keep an eye on these kind of problems. We then
talk about that. Everything is in one place. Nothing of this is reactive, right? I mean, we're talking about build and then security. It's built in.
Yeah.
To see it. So really enjoying that.
So yeah, once we
Yeah.
build, and in this case, we're building. This is a live build. This is happening right now in the background. If I actually jump into the build logs,
Yeah. You must sweat it a bit at this point.
yeah, this can get kind of interesting because we're really pulling down code. We're building. We're actually creating container images right now. So at this point in the process, we are performing a real build, and then we pass it off to advanced cluster security. And this is the thing I said earlier, is ACS is great because it can perform image scans and image analysis and other tests on components within your application during your build process. And it can also do cluster-wide security and look at your overall cluster health and including looking at the health of third-party components you've got deployed. But it's really important if you are doing any development yourselves is that you start building security principles in as early as possible. So if we jump into, let's see how our pipeline's going. Right, we're still running. We're getting most of the way through it. So here's our ACS dashboard. So this lets us do things like define custom security policies around, the age of packages or libraries. We're pushing policies out to our customers all the time. As new vulnerabilities become available, you can import custom policies if you want to set particular standards for your organization. We actually have a critical vulnerability raised here, and it's actually in the SonarQube version we've got deployed. Which basically means we need to go to our, platform operation, our platform team and say, they need to go and update this because it's a third-party component. We're actually introspecting those third-party containers to look for vulnerabilities. We're looking at the overall health.
This is almost like a meta moment in your demo, in your presentation, because you're sitting there going, I have to look after my code and my developers will be happy. And then you go, hang on a sec. I can look after my environment too. I'm not just here to say, developers, you got to get your stuff right and you got to get yours. It's this moment where everybody kind of goes, true.
DevSecOps is you got to secure at the development side and at the operations side. It's both ends here.
That's right. And you bring your audience, and so you bring us on that journey. So we get that realization on our own. And the buzzwordy DevSecOps, which is great, we kind of go, right. So there it is. That's it happening right there. And for me, this was that kind of moment where I settled back in the chair and went, boom. I don't say that, but you know what I mean. Like it happened.
And when this was running live, just before we did it in Jakarta, the worry was this was going to break because we had a new vulnerability. We had this brand new OpenSSL vulnerability come out.
Right.
And a few weeks before we released this for our events, we actually had the pipeline break because of a security vulnerability.
Yeah.
Now, if that had happened live and I was in here and it had come up like there's a new critical vulnerability and we've caught it and my pipeline broke and I had to jump in and see why, that's actually an opportunity because wow, we've just prevented a code release happening with a brand new vulnerability, something that's going to be in the press tomorrow or the next day, and everyone's going to be scrabbling to fix. We're already identifying it for you proactively, and I think that's quite incredible.
For sure, and even a demo catches it.
Luckily, we didn't have that crop up during this. So we now move back through our pipeline. And this is where we tag a release. This is really important. You don't just push latest or something when you're releasing containers in an enterprise environment. You need to know what version you're running where. We then push that tag release into our local container registry. That could be the OpenShift one. It could be our Quay enterprise grade registry. And then we push a update into our configuration repository. So we actually run 2 Git repositories for this. The configuration repository is very important when you're looking at things like GitOps, because this is where we start triggering the next part of the pipeline. This is where Argo CD comes in, where we guarantee consistent deployment or delivery of the app out onto, in this case, our development environment. We can gate our releases. We can know that we're running, version 1.2.3 in dev and we're running 1.2.2 in prod because we're running explicitly tagged versions. So in the background now, we've made that update and we've now handed it over to Argo. Let me, where am I?
I think that one.
Live.
Yeah, I think.
That's not the Argo CD. I need to just go and pull that login up quickly. There we go. There you are. So there we go. Let me quickly log in to Argo CD. So there's my Argo environment. We've got a bunch of projects and triggers happening here. And what happens is that Argo will detect that change and then force that synchronization and make sure your environment's behaving the way we want it to. And in this case, it's synced just in the last few minutes because the time zone differences. So fingers crossed, this application out here should have changed. And this is like a critical part in the demo because it's like, oh dear, what happens if it hasn't updated and the code change hasn't gone through, which it looks like it hasn't quite. So this is a fun thing when we're trying to do this live. So our update synced pushed version 944 to 84C. So that hasn't quite synced yet. So let's just force it. There we go. Now it's syncing. Now it's pushing that update out. So that takes a few minutes to run. So normally I'd be spending a bit longer inside ACS talking about its features. We'd be spending a little bit of time here because this is a live thing. We're going to wait for the code to actually get deployed. It takes a few minutes.
And that's an important point that when you do it, there's real storytelling going on. It's not just, and then I click this and then I do this. So the cadence is good.
That kind of hasn't quite gone out yet. We'll just leave that for a moment. So this is where we're really talking to, as we said, the inner loop and the outer loop. And really all the developers done here is cook code. They've been told that there's been a problem. They've come back and they've fixed the code. And everything else is automated. And then once we're happy, we can, use whatever our change release process is and say that we're now going to tell Argo to push that change into test or into production. And it will take care of all the heavy lifting for us. So let me go and see if the application has refreshed now. Yes, that's looking good. And we now have our floating shopping cart. And you notice it still has my drink bottle in the cart. So even though that's refreshed the application, it hasn't changed any of my data. So if you're managing this properly, the idea is that you can try and do these like non-customer impacting changes and do A/B releases, canary releases, whatever kind of release model suits your organization when you're actually pushing this out to production. So we've shown a little bit of that kind of developer view. So the developer right now is just focused on what's important to them, and the organization's getting that security. And we've shown a bit of the benefits around automation and management because we're automating that deployment process. We're implementing that DevOps or DevSecOps or GitOps or whichever ops your organization wants to do. And one thing that comes up as a question is, well, who owns which bit? Because in some organizations, a team will own the pipelines. In some organizations, the developers own the pipelines. But if you're an organization where your developers spending all their time writing and fixing pipelines and not writing code, you may have a problem. You may want to look at your processes and find the right balance. In some cases, it might be part of your operations, more your platform operations side that's actually owning the kind of pipeline and delivery process. But at the end of the day, most of your dev team should never care. So now we'll move on to the last bit of the story. Remember when we started this, we talked about North American retailer wanting to expand geographically. So if they want to expand into Asia, why not do it again using an OpenShift cloud service? In this case, we're going to use Red Hat OpenShift on AWS or Rosa as our example, but this could be any OpenShift environment running somewhere in the region. We want to run it as close as possible to our customers. We talk often about data gravity, but being able to offer a service as close as possible, particularly like a retail service, you want the web front end to be nice and responsive. Putting it close to your customers is critical. But if you're expanding into a new region, you don't know what your customer demand is going to be. So you maybe want to manage your costs. You don't want to buy new hardware. You want to deal with things elastically. And using OpenShift as the platform means we have this common platform for dev, test, UAT, prod. We have a common platform in North America and in Asia Pacific. We want to expand into EMEA, into Europe. Again, we can have a common platform. And we're still leveraging our kind of release management process, our CI/CD backend, our GitOps-based environment. So where do we benefit with Red Hat's approach? So here through ACM, I can actually go and create clusters from scratch. And it's fairly quick, about 30 minutes for most infrastructure providers. But for the demo, we're running low on time. So I'm going to import one we built a few minutes ago. I'm actually going to grab the credential from here. So I'm going to grab a token quickly. Now this is a limited time token. So if any of you want to go and grab this after the session and try and borrow my environment, it's tough because it won't exist. So we're going to grab that token. And I'm going to call it, make sure it's tagged as prod. So we make sure we get the prod app deployed. There we go, import. So we'll jump back to my overview. There we go. So that's important in the background. But if I was going to create this from scratch, I can go through here. We support quite a range of infrastructure providers today. Our bare metal approach through this has now been deprecated because we have this new assisted installer. And this is awesome because we know customers have interesting networks, unique hardware. In some cases, they may be deploying in secure environments where they need to do it offline. So our new assisted installer is really good because you can manage offline installs and highly secure environment type deployments. So it does give us a lot more flexibility in terms of supporting other infrastructure platforms. If I was deploying on Amazon, I'd just provide a credential. You can actually pre-cache credentials inside this. You'd give it a name. Maybe I'm going to deploy now into Europe. And I can actually select where in the world we currently support deployment for OpenShift on Amazon. So I can do all of that through the interface. And you might say, well, that's not very kind of GitOpsy. It's a bit kind of clicky, hands-on. Well, when you've defined it, you can actually go and export the YAML definition and then use that via your command line tooling, import it into your source code management and customize it. So it's a great way to actually build the configuration you want to use as well. So fingers crossed. Yeah, it's imported, right? Which is always fun because this is a non-deterministic part of the demo. So let's see if this cluster is actually live.
Yeah, and you really get the timing right. So not only are you like showing off the product. I mean, I know the product and I'm going, oh yeah, it's cool. You can do that. But you nicely bring it right back to, oh, and by the way, we are doing something here in this time frame.
Yeah,
oh yeah, look at
let
that.
me log in. So that's how fresh this environment is because I only got the credentials today. Fingers crossed it's actually all up and working. So this will bring me in with a normal kind of OpenShift admin interface. Already over here, though, in the overview, we now have 4 providers, more pods, more nodes, more clusters. So already got a lot more information already being introspected off our footprint. And this is, of course, where things decide to get a little cranky. Come on, here we go. Now it's loading. Great. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is quickly try and see if our application's been deployed. So if I go to routes and choose the Call Store app, I should have a version of our app deployed, and this should be the production version of the app, not the new version we've got in dev. So there's the app as we saw at the beginning of the conversation. Here's the other version with my shopping cart. You notice here my shopping cart's empty. This is a clean environment. I haven't used it yet. This is the version we got in prod. Meanwhile, if you were any decent retailer, you're probably going, no, that's still a bit ugly. We're going to refine the user interface. We might go through a few more changes before we're ready to actually go and push that out. But what we've actually done now is we've grown our footprint live on stage. We've actually scaled geographically and deployed our workload.
Yeah. And I love that some of the dev, you have the dev environment that has the updated cart, and then you go, I'm going to add this stuff. And don't worry, I haven't messed with that. We're still trying to get it right because, as you just said, it's not pretty enough or whatever. But you've literally just done it in front of all of us. And that, I think it just kicks. It really works.
Yeah. And I am honestly running 4 OpenShift clusters right now in order to show this off.
Yeah.
I can actually bring up the workload on the other cluster, the NA Prod 1 cluster as well. It's deployed there. Yeah. We just don't really have the time. And then, to kind of close the conversation off is, as we've said, our hybrid story or open hybrid cloud story is just a lot more than just where you do cloud native development and do things with containers. We know a lot of our customers are still deploying on premises, often in a traditional way using Red Enterprise Linux, or maybe they're deploying onto, a hyperscaler environment into one of the cloud providers. Again, they may be still deploying traditional workloads, but hopefully many of them are now starting to approach things like cloud native development, microservices, automation through CI/CD, getting that consistency and security they need. And we honestly think OpenShift's by far one of the best platforms available today for not only enhancing that developer experience, but giving you that consistency, whether it is bare metal, virtual, or cloud. So you get that, those benefits. And then to kind of help close the story is to say, and maybe you are at the point where you want to, expand geographically, whether it's, within Australia, New Zealand, whether it's within Southeast Asia, maybe it's globally. But wherever you're going, really, you need to come and talk to us, because we've been through this journey before and we know many of the challenges. And what I didn't do here was talk to some of those challenges. You think where we've been with Unix to Linux and where Red Hat was about normalizing that horrible Unix split ecosystem. I spent a lot of time dealing with customers running a range of Java workloads across lots of different Java footprints. And that was really kind of quite painful at times, because we'd have developers developing on JBoss and then deploying onto WebLogic, or developing, having this kind of split model because they're trying to save on costs. They didn't have a normalized environment. Or they'd have one application that would need WebSphere and another thing would need WebLogic. And now we're at risk in the Kubernetes ecosystem where you've gone and optimized something to run on AKS, and then your organization wants to run it on EKS or GKS, or the thing the developer's running on their desktop actually is very, very different from what they're running out in production. And we're hearing the same thing again, and Red Hat's been there every time. We've helped customers through this journey many, many times. And you hear some of our success stories with customers who are saying, we're going to normalize on OpenShift. It's open and it's hybrid.
Yeah. I was going to say, and then we do that. I mean, and it flows beautifully. Obviously, I interrupted you during this, and you were fiddling with this, but that was the point. But it really flows beautifully across this whole thing and takes you along the journey. And for Dev, for someone who's just seen it, I don't know if you saw it in the live stream. Let's pretend you didn't. If you did, what do you think? Like, how you're on customer sites? Does it resonate?
I was totally blown away. I mean, Steve, That was an awesome presentation of, just moving between slides and demos. Some really good things that, you brought in. And I was listening intently and did not want to bother because there's so much that was going on in my mind. The inner loop and outer loop, that was a great concept. I loved that. And you were right, right? Developers, they just want to write code and, want to have a consistent environment.
Hmm.
And I think,
That
some of the,
concept, I've really got to shout out to Hilan in our Singapore office, one of my team, is that he brought this to the story, and he's really helped bring. I've done a lot in the kind of operational landscape. He brought a lot of the developer story to this, and then he brought this inner loop, outer loop concept. And once he ran through it, it just seems to resonate. Because when you're developing, and I still like to cut a bit of code, that's what you're focused on. That's where
exactly.
you want to live, not how's it going to be released and how does it get out into the wild. You're focused on the code.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of it from a developer's perspective, I mean, they look at this and they're like, wow, because, then they get to focus on what they do and what they love to do best, which is, write code. It certainly makes their lives easy. And, that's how, you bring in that consistency. I love that, the way you kind of brought in, you had a lot of nuggets in there in terms of, all the 12-factor app methodology, like have a consistent code base, write everything, deploy everywhere. You have concurrency, that's what everyone wants, right? I mean, if you think about it, the example that you gave, deploy this in North America, if you want to scale it to different regions, that's what customers want, right? I mean, they want to, save time, they want to have it with minimum effort, and they want to scale, and they want it at the, least, cost. So again, whether it's, bare metal or cloud or, a hybrid, that was a great takeaway for me. I enjoyed that.
There's a couple of little. Um, there aren't much in the way of smoke and mirrors in this. The one thing that does happen is each application deployment's distinct. So, if I put something into the Asia Pac store, I won't see it in the EMEA store or the North America store. We don't have a centralized data plane in this particular example, but we have other example applications which have that, where they're using either Kafka or they're using one of our other technologies, maybe Scupper or something, to allow for inter-service communication, or maybe it's more API driven. And we talk then about running about data gravity, and we hold the source of truth in one place but distribute the workloads out. So we could have gone down that pathway for this, but we didn't have the UI we wanted. We couldn't kind of position the story where we wanted. So, if you want to dig into this with some other themes, again, I recommend you go and talk to your Red Hat account teams and say, hey, look, this is kind of neat, but the problem we're trying to solve is this. And if we haven't heard of it before, it'll be surprising. And if we haven't heard of it before, well, there's a good chance we can still help you solve the problem with what we've got in the kit bag today.
Yeah, and that's what I love about the demo is it gives ourselves as Red Hat folks and our customers who see it a common starting point. So we sit down at the table and go, right, we see these things and what it can do, and we understand it. And Dev is a Red Hatter and very smart, but instantly just got the story, got the value, and then you all sit down and just build on that. So we get that initial conversation going, come in with that shared understanding, and then just do hopefully amazing things from it. I just love that.
And if maybe you're going, well, actually, we do things a completely different way, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
With things like the way you approach DevOps, or the right way is the way that suits your organization. But it's not the right way if you're not actually delivering the business outcomes, if it's not delivering the developer agility, if it's not allowing you to deliver the services close to your customers, and if it's got a high overhead. So maybe we can help you tune it to suit the other needs of your organization.
Yeah. So we're right at the end, but quickly, talk about portability of the demo, and it was done by other people. I would love to hear how that they went.
Well, We base this on a much bigger demo solution we have that has a lot of other moving parts. So if you really want to dig into things like our AML strategy or some of our edge strategy, we have other demo components running on OpenShift for that. We kind of stripped it down into something we could have go out quite repeatably. And it was a collaborative effort globally. We had a bunch of people from Red Hat come in and help deliver this consistently, which means that our field teams can just go and request this and spin it up. We are going to try and get most of these artifacts in an external repository if someone wants to try it out on site with their own infrastructure. But things like the Cool Store application we use, that's readily available. There's several repositories online. I think one of the problems right now is there's too many versions of it available. So we may need to provide some guidance if you want to go and play with some of this yourself. So yeah, it's been really good. We've had quite a broad team working on it and just trying to make sure, again, we've got a tight story that we can deliver in a short period of time.
Yeah, and that's right. It's when you see it as part of Red Hat Connect, at least it's part of the larger presentations, and it fits right in.
Yeah, because the subsequent sessions in the day kind of expand on many of the themes we've covered here.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's that realization that not everybody has gone as far as this virtual customer of ours has gone by the end of their journey. They're all at different points in this journey. So wherever you are, how can we help you? How can we help you, achieve your business outcomes?
Yeah, that makes sense, and it perfectly marries, dev and ops and security and DevSecOps and all of that to really get that common language going on.
Yeah, we nearly had FinOps in there as well. There's the original scope had showing things like the cost management portal that we have, and then there's other, and then all of a sudden we've got a 2-hour demo, not a 25-minute show and tell.
Yeah. Well, and it shows that where it can go, and this is one piece, but like you said, you get more in the other sessions. You can build this out. You can go a lot of places with it.
Yeah.
That's nice. Cool. Well, we are hitting the end. I guess any final words as to how people should find out more about this? I mean, we've kind of covered that, but Steve, if you want to just sort of...
Well, I'm not particularly difficult to find online. If you search for me in the word open source or Linux, you can typically find me. But I recommend you talk to your local, anyone you deal with locally at Red Hat. They'll be more than happy to have a chat with you about this and run through, why we do an open hybrid cloud, not just a hybrid cloud or multi-cloud.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Once again, thank you for doing this. For someone who's not attended, that was great. I'm going to be certainly sharing this with my customers and on social media. So, someone who's not attended or not seen can definitely have a look. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Okay, and thanks, August, for the opportunities.
No, thrilled to do it. And as I said, I mean, as you know, this will be on the OpenShift YouTube page for you to watch at your own speed, or 1.5 if you like us to talk a lot faster. We can do that too, depending on your time. Always check out the Red Hat live streaming calendar. Like and subscribe to the stuff below. I've always wanted to say that. That's always fun. And finally, World Cup kicks off on Monday. Quite excited. So I look forward to sharing some of that with you all. We have upcoming sessions for the live streaming channel, and I look forward to seeing people there. But for now, we're done. Thank you, everybody. And we will catch you next time. Bye.